Welcome to the first ever video from Gouldfish Custom Rods, where I'm going to give you a view on how I go about building one of my rods, in particular wrapping of guides. This rod is an 8'5" Gouldfish LemonGlass. The blank is made for me by CTS in New Zealand, fantastic company. But this is a specific rod for me, and it's a wonderful fast action modern glass rod. The rod itself is to be used with this fantastic Abel reel. Not sure if you can see all the detail on that, but it's really quite wonderful. So that's what I'm trying to match here. So I've picked an agate guide that I think best represents some of the blue in there, which is this wonderful one from Perfect. They make really wonderful agate guides. So that's what I'm going to use, and I'm going to wrap for you, and I'm going to try and pick some colors that bring out a little bit of the blue, a little bit of the brown. I think the rod picks a lot of the yellow up, and maybe a splash of red at the end, just for giggles. But as I said, a really beautiful reel, and hopefully we'll get something that looks good. Crash bang. The first thing you do, or the first thing I do, is to mark the spine on the rod, which will obviously be different on each segment. Hopefully you can see here I've marked in red where the spine is. So this is basically where the rod itself has a tendency to want to flex in one direction. And for fly rods, I put my guides on the inside of that spine, which I think it gives it a better overall action. Always up for debate on that. Let me just put that back together again. And then I've marked where this guide, the stripper guide, goes here on the blank. This is done, I actually cheated a little bit, so as a reference point I used one of my other 8'5" weights lemon glasses that I'd built earlier. So that's the point that I'm aiming for here. So the first thing I'm going to do is to attach the guide, and I use this very thin masking tape, kind of a plastic masking tape, offer it up to the blank, and then align it on top to where I want it to be. Put that in place. Make sure that's straight up and down, looks good. It could probably come with just a fraction that way. And that's lined up a treat on the spine actually. Just fabulous. So the first thing I'm going to do, one of the things the tools I'm going to be using here is this, which is I've forgotten the word for it now. It's really very helpful. I'll edit this bit out. So I'll be using this burnishing tool. The burnishing tool has a couple of functions. One is to get the threads all nice, evenly spaced out and no gaps after you've done the wrap, but it also is quite nice for nudging the thread bits back in together again. I also use a loop of thread, nothing magical here. Just a loop of thread, and I'll use that to pull the ends back in once I have finished doing a wrap. And trusty razor blade. I go through a lot of razor blades because they get blunt very, very quickly, particularly with the high quality silk that I use. The silk that I'm using is a YLI Japanese silk, number 100. It's extremely fine, which is great for a beautiful thin finish. But it means you do a lot more turns than you would if you're using some of the wider threads that people tend to use on some of the rods. So I'm going to bring my carriage up here, put my glasses on, which is always a bonus. And I'm going to offer up the first couple of threads. So I start those just where I want them to begin, the beginning of the thread here. I'll use a little bit of the tag end of the tape to hold it in place. And I just want to, after one wrap, just turn it, cross it once, cross it twice, and already under the tension it's under, that's already holding it pretty nicely. It's probably about a turn or two further than I would have wanted it to be away from the guide, but I can easily fix that just by now taking a thread back out, putting it up, then tightening it, and then pushing it in. So now I'm quite happy with that. I'll take one more turn before the foot of the guide, and it's all nice and even. I'll take my little razor blade and off it goes. Right, now I'm just going to wrap up the guide. As you can see, this is one that is prepared earlier, so there's a little bit of a gap as I do that, but that's not worried. The key thing is just not to cross any of these threads, and if you cross even one, then it's time to go back and start again. So now I've got that a few times over the foot of the guide. It's at that point I'll just come back here with my nail or the burnishing tool, depending on which is more comfortable. I'm much more tactile as a person, and a little bit of, looks like some of the China marker there, or a bit of thread. We can take that out later. So there we go. A couple more turns, 4 or 5 more turns, and then again pack those threads back down. You see, that time it was being a bit naughty, and that's because it's not quite straight over the guide, and that's normal as you rise up the guide. Again, another few turns, and then pulling it back, pulling it back, pulling it back, pulling it back. Again, you could use the burnishing tool, either the end or the edge of it like that, to do exactly the same thing. Probably looks prettier than my finger as well, but it's not the way that I like to do it. Okay, unfortunately my thread carriage is, there's a couple of bits on my tramway here for the thread spool where it tends to get hung up. Probably I could do with either cleaning it up and sanding it down properly, or just getting a new one, to be honest. Okay, another 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, pushing them back, pushing them back. At this point, obviously I can dispense with this bit of tape because that guide's not going anywhere. And we'll continue on up the guide. Occasionally you'll get that where it jumps, particularly when it comes to the guide foot, it'll just jump on the wrong side of that thread, and you just need to catch that really quickly. I know some people don't, and try to deal with it later by burnishing that out, but it is a real pain to do that. Again, that thread carriage is actually what's causing me the problem. So, I'm actually quite sure what it's caught up on, because I did clean it a while back. Alright, so just continue on up the guide. And again, the actual guide itself, in addition to the thread carriage not behaving today, the actual guide itself has a little bulge there as it gets wider, which is, you know, part of the design, and will actually mean that it's held into place better, but it also means you just got to be really careful when taking these out. Again, pack it down, pack it down, pack it down. Ooh. And I'll cut the video here, and then you'll have a chance to see a bit later when I get to the end. Or maybe I won't, actually, I might as well just keep going. Best laid plans. I'll make a decision on the cutting room floor. Again, just making sure we're right up there, nicely aligned. Thread tension is kept nice and even, and quite often when you buy the thread spool itself, it'll come with little springs like this, which you push up against the spool of thread to keep the tension. I've actually dispensed with those and replaced it with 2 rare earth magnets. And those magnets actually create a much more consistent pressure against the spool, and I actually like it much more. Right, we're getting close to where I'm going to want to finish this. As you can see, that little bit just cheeky sneaked over the end there. I'm sure. So if you're still watching, this is how we'll finish off the loop. So we got it there. I'm just going to take my little loop of thread here, and I'm going to hook it under. Try not to dislodge the thread in the same place. And then it's just going to be 5 or 6 turns. And what you'll find again is that when you've gone over that thread there, because of the change in height, you've got a high opportunity for it to then cross back over again. So you just want to be careful of that, go back if necessary, keep it nice and straight. As you can see, just taking up the foot of the guide, a couple more turns. I'm pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I take that, put some finger pressure on it, a little bit of a back turn so that we take the pressure off the silk and that stops the end from fraying. And then pass that through the loop. If it had less fat fingers, it would be easier. And then take these loose ends here and pull them through. So now we've got that thread come through, just poking through on the other side, bring it to place on the side there where it's easy to get to. Take my trusty razor blade and just slide it across here like that. I can just give it a good burnish on the burnishing tool. Just loosen out any bumps, and particularly where the thread comes in underneath, where you've done the tie off. Just give that a really good neat punch. But that's actually not too bad. So that's the base guide, and then I'm thinking about how to make that match beautifully with the reel that I showed you before. Obviously, one of the colors that comes out of that is that blue color, which is obviously from a wild native brown trout, which is what the pattern is. So I spent some time picking some thread, and this was a pretty good match. I have pretty much every color of this thread that's available. So let's stick that, just a little needle here. I'm going to take a bit. I think I'll do just a tag turn of four turns. A lot of people get frightened by doing these narrow wraps, and I'm not surprised really, because they are an absolute nightmare when you first start. But actually, once you get a technique, and this is my technique, is I'll hold my loop here with the thread next to it, and then I'll push that against the blank. I'll wrap it over once on this side, and then I'll catch it over itself. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've caught over that. As you can see, there's 4 points that it crosses there. Just bring it back round, pass it through our friendly loop here, and then pull the tag ends there. So you've got a crossover, and then pull that tight so that they're at adjacent points here. And then it's really just a case of either using the tool, your burnishing tool, or using your fingernails like me. Just give that, and apologize, I know my fingers are where you want to be looking, but that's me not used to making videos. Let's see how that looks. Certainly a nice blue. So that's in there now. What I'll do then is I'll take the razor blade, I'll give it a quick slice there, and another quick slice there. So that's the first tag. And I think, again, looking at the reel, if I was going to go over the top, I would use a number of different colors here, but I think I'm going to go with just a couple. And I think what I'll go with now will be a red, because a red splot is actually quite pretty, and will draw attention to the rod. So again, I've taken a red that I've matched for, closer to this. Sure, I must have one of these actually open. 201. Again, here sometimes people will use metallic threads as well. My preference is not to use metallic threads unless I'm using thicker thread for the main winding thread. And that's because the metallic threads are a bit thicker, and you end up with a bulge, and it just looks out of proportion. If I was doing this with on a bigger rod, for example, as opposed to this 5-weight, and I was using a different thread, or a thicker nylon thread, a D or an A even, then I would probably have gone with a metallic as well. So as you can see here, that's just caught inside, but I'm doing exactly the same thing as I did last time. But this time crossing 3 times instead of 4, because I want this band to be narrower, because there's a lot less of that red in the reel. Again, pull it tight, bring it to wrap around. You'll find this was quite fragile with just 3 turns, especially if you don't get it tight. One trick, make it a bit wet. And that will actually go a long way to holding the thread in place. You could have used alcohol there, but we drink alcohol in this house. Right. So it's a little bit of that. And I think just to, again, to keep with the colours on the rod, on the reel, we'll go with a little bit of dark brown at the end. I think it'll just close it off quite nicely in 4 turns of that. So again, exactly the same process. Take my little loop, wrap it around, 4 turns of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can see that that's 4 turns. Then it's crossing, push it on through, pull it through, pull it tight. Again, same as before, just shimmy it all the way up. I'm trying to keep it consistent, keep the tension in there. So shimmy it a little bit, then put the tension back in, shimmy a little bit, put the tension back in, shimmy a little bit and put the tension back in, and then close it off like that. This is where don't even want to tempt fate here, but this is where you accidentally, when you cut that, you accidentally then slice into like all the other bands or somewhere in the middle, and you've got to start all over again, which is the frustration of doing these bands, particularly you've got to put 10 or 12 guides on a rod. But that's pretty much the look or the colours I think we're going to go for. What I'm going to do now is just to get a sense of the colour and how the colour changes once it's got finish on it. What I do now is just put a coat of alcohol on it. So this is my little bit of denatured alcohol, a little bit of a paintbrush, and you can see that gives you a sense of how the translucency will change of the thread, and the colour changes a little bit with it. And I'm actually not too unhappy with that. Anyway, let me know what you think. Think I've got that, or shall I change the colour? This is your chance to have a vote. So drop me a note and see if you think I should go with this colour scheme, or whether you've got a better idea that I could try. Well, hope you've enjoyed that as much as I've enjoyed making it. I didn't do any cuts, so there's a lot of errors, but it's the first video, so I think I'm allowed to make a few mistakes. Thanks for watching. Bye.